I've had a wonderful time getting to know our panelists over the past few weeks. We had some prep calls, and then a couple of us had a chance to dine together last night. And just in case you're one of the 2 people in the room who have not heard about our amazing pizza experience, we had an amazing pizza experience last night. So Gabe, Mitch, and Carrie can all share the favorite varieties. So, who was here when James Cain was our keynote? Raise your hands. All right, love James Cain. Saw him just a few weeks ago at a law firm retreat in Phoenix, Arizona. And when he did his rapid fire get to know me intro, I was yet again inspired. And I've probably seen him do that, 12 times now at law firm retreats. And every time, it's still great. So instead of reading their bios, which you can do on your own, I thought we would do a rapid fire get to know your panelist through a series of questions. So I'm going to start with Gabe, the far end. Complete this sentence, please. My favorite book, movie, television show, or podcast I am reading, watching, or listening to right now is?
Atomic Habits, James Clear, and TV show all time, well, recently Fauda, and all time is Seinfeld, of course.
Oh, I just answered one of those. I
That's
just
okay.
chose podcast.
You can just choose one.
And then my podcast, Brene Brown, Dare to Lead.
Yep, my podcast is This Old Marketing with Joe Pulizzi and Robert Rose.
Mitch?
My book I'm rereading, re-listening to Kill a Mockingbird, and also The Effortless Experience, redoing that one.
I love it. All right, going backwards this time, starting with Mitch. This conference will be successful if?
We all take one idea back and implement it.
Yep, if I help somebody learn something, and if somebody can help me learn something.
Yeah, walk away inspired, just the one thing. I can't go beyond a one thing, so that's all I think we can manage.
Okay, if we were doing karaoke, my song would be, Mitch.
Elton John's Your Song.
Tom Petty, Free Fallin'.
Can't Stand Losing You, The Police.
My favorite Pandora station, sticking with the music theme here, or Spotify or whatever streaming service you prefer, is Jen.
I literally don't have one.
I literally
I
don't
tried.
have one. That's all right. True confession. I don't have a television, so. Gabe?
Thievery Corporation. Very few people probably know
Mitch?
that. Yes?
Don't have one.
Nice job, Carrie.
Don't have one. Okay, let's ask one more. So, the best advice I ever got was, Mitch?
My grandmother always said, it's just as easy to fall in love with someone who's rich as poor.
I love that.
I had an executive coach who kind of taught me about my knowing center and my thinking center and how important it is to kind of know what your gut is, so trust your gut.
Progress is not linear.
Especially in CX. Perfect segue.
Definitely in CX.
So, just quickly, since we have some people in the audience who are just getting started on their CX journeys, our topic today, onboarding, and how we can get aligned with CX, UX, and EX, just want to do a super fast intro and definition of CX, EX, and UX. So Gabe is going to start with CX.
One word, feeling. CX is a feeling. It is, in my own term, is a transformative business strategy. It's not a department, it's not a title, it really is a business strategy that permeates every level of the organization. Ultimately, it is how clients perceive you, the brand, and the interactions, the sum of the parts, every interaction along the journey. That applies equally to employees.
Wonderful, thank you. Jen, will you take EX?
Yeah, employee experience, and sometimes this comes out wrong. Our product is our people, and that's what we're delivering is the relationships with our people, their expertise. And so the employee experience is so important to this whole thing because it's how do we support them, give them the tools that they need to deliver exceptional client experiences, how do we make them feel supported, and just have human relationships with our clients that are beneficial.
And UX?
UX, I like to say user experience, that digital experience that people have along that journey that applies both to the clients as they go through all those moments and touch points digitally, as well as the experience that our employees have in all those digital touch points, and where those things can be effortless and where they can cause more friction.
Thank you. All right, so the focus of the conversation today is on onboarding specifically and the impact it makes on CX. Since CX impacts all of the functions of an organization, how did you determine where to get started in your CX journeys? And for most of you, it was onboarding. So how did you get to that decision?
Well, interestingly, we actually made that decision just as the world started to implode. March of 2020, we had already made a decision, and that decision was never reversed. I think it came down to really asking a simple question to my firm, and that was if any board member or the CEO could name one initiative. I just said that it's not an initiative. If you can think of a strategy that was as transformative, not just now, but into the future, 5-7 years from now, if anybody could come out with one thing, then we would invest that and CX would be next. But there was not a single response that really identified anything more transformative, anything that would be much more inclusive in terms of, the firm participating. And so we just went with it, with the understanding that very few people really got a good sense of what CX was about and what was ultimately going to be the outcome of that process.
All right, and Mitch, will you build on that? I know you did some process internally to help identify that.
I think already at the conference, we've heard a little bit about how important it is to focus on journey mapping. So at our organization, we brought those clients together, and then we trained some of our managers, and we went through a client journey mapping and empathy process. When we pulled all of that information together, we were able to study the friction points and the points of challenge and the points of excitement and enthusiasm with the clients. And we discovered that if we did onboarding better, if we made it a smarter process, that in fact we know that we can make the rest of the client experience even better. So that's how we decided to focus on onboarding, is looking at what needed to be improved from that point of we want a new client to that point of the project being launched. There's this space that needs to be workflowed, process needs to be created, and things need to be done to avoid some of the friction points that happen later in the process.
And Jen, how did you prioritize?
I just did client interviews and started tracking what I was hearing the most, and onboarding came up, and so then I brought it in-house and I started talking to our employees, and onboarding was a friction point for them too, so that's where we used the data that we collected, and that's how we prioritized it.
When I started talking about onboarding, I couldn't help but the song from The Sound of Music, Do Re Mi, kept coming into my mind. Let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start, and that is kind of that orienting client. So I'm going off script, I apologize, but I just was inspired, so I'm going to throw it out there. What aspect of the onboarding process created some of those friction points that you uncovered in your journey mapping, in your client feedback interviews? Where was the pain? Where was the little pebble
Everywhere.
under the mattress?
Ours was that we just didn't have a process in place for it, so it's business development did their job in sales, and the service team did their job in service, and nobody was responsible for the middle. And that came clear to our clients who were like, hey, in sales, I already gave you all this information so we could build our quote, and then your people that were onboarding me, like, they asked for the same information, like, why should I give it to you twice? I'm like, well, that's dumb, yeah. So then I talked to our employees, and one of the things that I shared earlier is one of our employees said, the sales guys are selling something, and they're not scoping and pricing it correctly, and they're missing some things. So when we're getting it, we're already behind the 8 ball, we're already in the red, and we're not able to service them, and it's creating a friction point. So that's where it was really like a loud sign that we should start there.
And that was something in Carrie's session earlier. She mentioned the comfort of knowing the process and having the consistent approach for that for the employees too. So how did your employees react when you started piloting your efforts?
Shocked, really, initially. The importance of gathering client data and doing research is so critical because you're not really just speaking in hypothetical terms. It really is how we lean on and how we build around client feedback, and so it's hard to argue. But even then, after showing the facts, showing real statements from clients, and really articulating that to the team, it was when the team began to kind of get behind it a little bit and really understand that, yes, we're a little bit all over the place. Not only that, it's not to sound critical, it was just mostly an issue of like recognizing that we're doing something that we could do better. And it wasn't to say we're doing a terrible job. It was just really taking it to the next level. And there was kind of a moment where everybody came together and recognizing that we can do so much better. And I think that the important thing, the takeaway was that we were complacent about onboarding, that we didn't really understand the importance of that. I like to call it defining moments, first impressions, how they matter to the client. And also it was a great experience for the client itself because sometimes we actually give the market maybe too much credit. And really where is that we need to actually educate, and this is kind of a two to tango kind of thing. I think we help them help us. And so I think that was just really a starting conversation that paid off.
I just add, I think it's an easy place to start. When you're working in client experience, in a lot of your organizations, people may not get what that means. Mm-hmm. But when you start talking about something that's tangible like onboarding, and you talk to clients and they say, here were our frustrations, guess what? When you talk to your employees, they say, yeah, we have a lot of frustrations during that time as well. And you're uncovering that. So the beauty of tackling onboarding is that you're going to make employees happier, you're going to make your clients happier, and probably more importantly, you're going to start leveraging your digital assets and your digital technologies in a far more effective way, I think.
Yeah. I was just going to say, our employees were excited about it because it was obviously creating pain points for them. And like I shared earlier, our sales team was excited to take part of it because they want these clients to have a good experience and stick around so that they can get their commissions paid out over the next couple of years. So everybody wins.
So for those of us sitting in the audience thinking, okay, great, now we get it, onboarding is important, it's critical, but what are the mechanics of how to make this happen? One theme that really came out of the conversations was they didn't try to eat the elephant at once, they didn't try to boil the ocean, they started with a pilot. So talk to me a little bit about how you prioritized the pilot, how you tweaked and learned from that effort, and then how it's evolved since.
You want to go first?
Jen,
no, go for it.
ladies first.
For our pilot, after I knew that we were going to do onboarding, I combed through our data and saw what market was onboarding the most clients every month, and then what service lines they were onboarding at a higher frequency. And that's how I decided to start with our commodity crops market and focusing on tax and assurance onboarding.
Go ahead, Mitch.
It was easy to decide for us, the pilots. It was really around the most enthusiasm from the associates. Mm-hmm. So where our employees were really eager to have improvements made, we decided to start there.
Yeah, and so law firms in the world, in the audience here, that is what we've seen at Wicker Park work best, is play with the willing. Once you get them on board and have some success and can share the stories, law firms like to be first and a half. They don't really love to be pioneering and start things. So if you can get somebody who's got enthusiasm about it, that's really helpful. Yeah. Gabe, any other thoughts on pilots?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just similar to them, I think it's a matter of like, for us, it was just exclusively, brand new clients, right? And then we wanted to have a representation across the firm, so it wasn't going to be just a single service line per se, but it was just the need to have wide representation, but to just really focus on a specific target that was being onboarded. And that was just, we know that without focus and discipline, you just can't get there. And so that was the way we kind of framed the kickoff, if you will, and really started to kind of onboard and create that process in a much more scale.
I would just add too that I think all of us depended on the client's voice at the beginning, and then that led to listening to the employees. And when you have all that data pulled together, the answer becomes clear. It makes it easier.
And you did the feedback in different ways too. So I know, Jen, you personally did all those client visits. What other methodologies did you employ?
We thought that it was really key that to hire a third party, and so we did more than 40 interviews that really went across the board, like really extensive interviews. And when you think 40, it could be either too many or not enough, right? And I think what you realize soon is that you begin to see the themes, and that a larger number of interviews is not going to, it's kind of diminishing returns, right? And so we started there. We was third party. It was all brought in. Then we did the same internally, and then we tried to essentially look at the results and see where there was a match. Now, just for the record, I feel like sometimes we talk with such level of authority here, like we kind of, everything was just very well thought out. It was very well thought out, but it wasn't easy to get there. So in no way am I trying to convey that this is a walk in the park, and because it's really trial and error, and you keep going until you get it right or close to it.
So you heard the example, Gabe outsourced sort of completely, Jen really owned it internally. I outsourced part of it in developing the architecture that we would follow, then trained our people to do those surveys, so and interviews for journey mapping. So we used manager level associates interviewing their clients with either me or the innovation leader at the firm, and then we had a recorder who was capturing all the information verbatim and doing the empathy mapping during that time frame. And so we sort of created a hybrid approach.
One size fits one. My recommendation is to figure out what's going to fly in your firm, with your culture, with your people, and then go that way. I know we work with a lot of firms who are really reticent to start feedback programs of any kind, and we spend a lot of time talking to them about what the barriers and obstacles are, and help them figure out, okay, what can you do with the resources and the mindset that you have in place? So there's lots of different ways to get at it. In legal, onboarding is, okay, we did a conflicts check, we set up the payment terms and have signed an engagement letter. And then it's, off to the races, or sometimes it's just ready, fire, aim, start working on a matter, and then negotiate some of that later. So law firms are really slow to the successful onboarding. It's something we're just now seeing. Where did Dan move to? Dan from Benish, in the back of the room. He's got a big meeting tomorrow to talk about revamping onboarding at his firm, which actually has a great new client kit and process in place. They're trying to improve it. So any pointers from the audience, share with Dan. Make him look good. He's new to his CX role. But how did you define the tools and the process that allowed for more intentional and deliberate onboarding in your various process improvement?
We have a CRM system, and so we use Dynamics because that's where our pipeline was. And so we build in a process where it generates a service agreement for you, and then it does the proposal, and then they sign it, and then it comes back in and sets up the project framework and the new client setup form. All that to be said, that was an employee experience problem that everybody hated doing, and so we automated it so people would use it more, which means then I had more access to the data, and they weren't doing it outside of there. So when a new client is marked as one, I know where it goes, trigger inside to set up the new client setup form. That's where I start my process every time of initiating the welcome letter, the internal kickoff, the external kickoff, and things like that. So I use Dynamics because I didn't want anybody to have to learn a new tool. So just use what we had existing and made it work.
And what other things besides just the basics, contact information that typically go into a CRM? What kind of client preferences are you capturing at the initial onboarding process and through those tools, like communication or responsiveness definitions or any, this guy likes cherry danishes, what other little extras, value adds are you incorporating in your data collection?
Well, similar to Jen, I think for us, we started to update the forms within CRM. So every new, there's a pipeline in the CRM, and we have been updating just so that we actually keep kind of similar to you. It's like as soon as the opportunity becomes, a win, then that triggers all the information that we need in order to take it from there. But to your question specifically, we started to actually make some fields required. Now, if you know anything about our profession, much like law firms or any other profession in professional services, you know that CRM is just really, really just leave it alone, right? So what we did instead was to train individual people at the admin level to really work with, those, the professionals and trying to get as much data on the front end. And that is just to kind of get to know the client a little bit more. The fields were there, but now they're required. We need to get the data, or else, we just, we can't really elevate the experience. We can't really design the experience if we don't have the data. So really it was mostly about training fewer people that work very closely with those service lines and trying to bring that data into the CRM and task them and make them accountable and have CX goals around their contribution to the full journey as a way to kind of, get richer data in the database.
Mm-hmm. And part of our external kickoff call is meant to talk about what is your expectation on communications. Are you a texter? Do you want email? Do you want a phone call? What is that? And the person who's leading that external kickoff call will wrap all that up in an email and send it to the client, but then also track it back to their Dynamics record. So anyone else who works on that account can also see that data in their preferences. And then in our specific market, we did a study across all of the service lines to say, if you had this information about our clients, how could you be proactive in giving them services? So one of the areas was if we onboard a new farm client and we have their org structure, we can help them apply for farm program payments because we have a special division that does that. But they're like, all we need to do is look at their org structure and we can tell blah, blah, blah. So now we're gonna bring that into our new client setup form. We have to get a 7216 signed. But once we know that, then we can have the other service lines start to be more proactive in what they can offer to the client too. So I think it's customized by your client.
I guess I just want to add, in the contact form, I didn't say it actually, but, just basic information, number of facilities, locations, number of employees, revenues, all the stuff that was already there, but now they're becoming more a required field. You need that information for so many different ways, not just different reasons, not just CX, but think about it, in terms of growth opportunities for the firm as the client grows. That information was lacking.
Did any of you have a welcome kit or a collateral piece that goes to clients as part of this process?
We didn't. We do now. That was part of the discovery, and that's one of the elements that became so apparent that in order to really orient the client, because really think about it, it's orientation, is how can they learn more about you so they can actually get the most out of your firm. And so really we designed this, this tool, we call it the welcome kit, nothing revolutionary, but it really does the job in terms of, right now it's just in digital form. It lives mostly in the way of sometimes PDF. We're trying to actually, as we build more technology around it, and we have a tool that will really guide that process, it'll live there live as a living document. Right now it's more of a really great looking piece that really informs the client, helps them understand about, the touch points over the next 12 months. It really is helping the client understand what's going to happen in the next 3 months, 9 months, et cetera. It's simple stuff, but it wasn't really there. And so now this visual is helping them understand that they didn't just hire a an auditor. They just hire a firm with many resources that as whatever the, life takes the business, we could be there along the way. So it really is understanding that the information was there, but that we weren't doing a really good job at articulating that process.
I really love what Gabe has done with that welcome kit because it's personalized, and I think that's probably one of the most important parts of that. When people say welcome kit, it's like, oh, somebody at the front desk is throwing a bunch of stuff into a packet and sending it out. Gabe's team is customizing that message and creating and outlining what the experience will look like for the client and what those defining moments are going to be. That is going to inform the client and help them set their expectations and determine where their personal value adds are going to be, but it's also going to help the team understand these are the expectations that the clients have that we have to live up to. We talk about technology and how do we begin to use that more effectively. This is going to be the place where CRM needs to come to life because we are going to say these are these defining moments. Today, CRM gets used mostly for a sales tool and a database. It's really not being used as a client relationship management tool. Funny, they named it that. The most powerful part of CRM is managing activity. Not in the past, but in the future. Mm-hmm. Those planned activities of things we need to do that we've promised to do well.
What other technologies have been critical to this process? I know we talked about the onboarding telephone calls and someone actually having the conversation and then inputting the data, but what other tech do you need and have you selected to support your efforts?
Let me run with that one again because I'm really excited about how technology needs to fill in the gap. I talked about, we got technology and CRM kind of reaching up during the sales process. Then we've got usually workflow tools over here on project management. Onboarding doesn't seem to have the glue. Now you could use and customize your CRM tools, I think, to do that. We've decided to license a product called Guide CX. Ryan, Blake, I'll make sure to try to get them as a sponsor next year. It's a tool really that allows us to map out that process for both the client and the team. Mm-hmm. So the workflow tool can assign work out to team members within the organization, and it assigns the responsibilities and activities and tasks out to the client. Mm-hmm. So the beautiful part is that gets put into a custom object, in our case in Salesforce, and everybody in the organization can see where we are in the onboarding process with the client, which is very, very valuable, and everybody wondering what's going on. But the client can see that. They can understand if they're holding the process up or if...
Transparency?
I was
wow.
about to say.
Never imagined that would be important.
Yeah, very excited about that.
That's very cool. Are there tools that you're using?
We use, for certain products, Process Street, which is kind of the same thing where you can assign tasks to your client or internally. And that's where I said at step 111, it sends me an email and says, Jen, call them for an onboarding interview. And then we got some of our advisory team to use Monday.com. I don't think that goes externally, so they're using it more for having a consistent onboarding experience, so they can just copy that project's framework to each new client. So that's what we've been using.
Yeah, we're lagging in that area. Technology, I think Mitch and Jen are ahead of us. But that issue of transparency, can you imagine the anxiety that produces in a firm that is trying to be transparent with their clients? I mean, it's unbelievable. Really, that's where it's at. And the thing about it is that, again, back to the issue of the welcome kit, right? It's not just a PDF you send. It really is a living document that when you start moving onboarding away from just simply brand new clients, but think about the annuity work that comes back every year where an entire engagement team is completely new. So you're reintroducing, re-onboarding clients year over year. And that's really a phenomenal thing that we haven't really been doing at all. And so that technology has to be there. I sat through The Guy CX demo, I think is fantastic. I was getting anxious on behalf of my partners, thinking that level of transparency with clients, we would have to deliver. Yeah, that's the whole point of it. So,
well, I think this is about scale too. We'll onboard 2,500 new clients at our organization this year. And so if you don't have technology, what army of people are you going to, map out this? I think you have 120 steps in the onboarding process.
Some of our stuff does, yeah.
Yeah, some of the stuff does. So when you start mapping out and really putting all the detail together, with 120 steps, without somebody managing and that process being clear, how effectively could people be without tools and resources to manage it?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I agree.
probably what, 80 steps got done consistently,
Correct.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the tech is really important, but Gabe is obviously making things happen and affecting change without all the robust tech options out there. But how are you tackling the people changes, the behavioral changes that have to occur to make the tech work? Because it's only as good as what is included, and following the process. I know we find you have to tell somebody 6 or 7 times how to do something, why it's important to do something before it even starts to be sinking in a little bit. So how are you handling the cultural people change that have to occur with this?
We took away the training wheels. So when people were using old processes in their systems, they were finding it on our intranet and kind of doing it backdoor. So we kind of removed all that and then told the administrative teams, no one's allowed to come straight to you for this. They have to go and do it here. But it wasn't like bullying them per se. I literally said, how can we make this easier for you? And they told us. And so it was more of like them picking the solution and us implementing it. So it wasn't this way out, it was that way in, and everyone's better when it's their own idea. So
That's the huge point, I think, is I think Dale Carnegie says, people will support a world they help create. And so we've intentionally involved people in building out the process, in building coalition and testing the onboarding model with the internal audience very effectively so that they feel like, okay, we've got skin in the game.
Yeah. So brand, if brand is your people, there's got to be an alignment, because CX isn't really anything effective unless it is aligned with the people that, their behavior. One thing that came away from our research too was, deliberate intentional training that, and the word training kind of scares people because it is, there's no finish line here, and so you're constantly having to educate. And as new people come on board, new individuals, how do they assimilate that? How do you know your brand values? How do you align that with now the CX values and the core values of the firm? So it is really an ongoing. But again, the important thing to recognize is that this is a giant process that never ends. And so if you look at it that way, you will never start. The idea is simply that we started to kind of break up in small groups and really doing more customized training in ways that people really believe that they actually play a role, and involving every member of the firm. This wasn't just for principals or managers or some other higher level professional. It was for everybody, from admin team all the way to the top. So I think that's really the only way that it begins to stick, that people really feel like they can make a contribution, that clients really, when they evaluate us, it isn't just about the service we provide, it is so much more. But it's slow going.
So for the pilot efforts, what's going really well? What are you proud of, and how it's impacting CX, EX, and UX? But also, in the spirit of vulnerability, since we like Brene Brown up here, what is not going well? What's hard?
The hardest part, I think, is I want it to go faster. I want the whole implementation process to go faster. I want us to be able to identify the process. I want us to get all the technology rolled out. I want us to do more than just small pilots in these different areas. I just That's the hardest thing for me.
Pace.
I would say the same thing. Like when you have 30 different service lines, it's overwhelming because how do you do that consistently across the board and make it meaningful every time? So that keeps me up at night is, okay, we did a little bit here, but how are we going to do the rest of the firm? And if I do that, then I have no time to do anything else, and I get in my own head a lot.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. I think the other challenge that I am facing is, keeping leadership focused because they want results now. And so metrics, we're just starting to kind of generate reports and really assess, in this case, just purely onboarding. Everything we're building around onboarding alone, there's like this giant reports that really help us understand, are we really impacting? Are we really making a difference? Are clients really appreciating what we're doing in any way? So culturally, it isn't just you driving CX, it's keeping leadership focused and discipline in a way that they continue to just say, this is really a great investment of money and time. And ultimately that will, lead to results. But, keeping them in check is hard.
And
it is hard to
what are some of
quantify.
those metrics you're using to evaluate?
We do surveys on surveys, right? So from the very beginning, we have this, the process of, producing how many welcome kits, the impact, the feedback, that's just one. And then another step is that now 30 days, we have this check-in meeting, and now we actually evaluate what the client says at that 30-day period. And then we send another survey, now from the managing partner asking from beginning to end, 3 questions, very quick. What was your experience overall in terms of onboarding? Did we succeed in helping you understand what this partnership is going to be about? Do you feel more empowered to say, I can actually lean on this firm? I made the right decision, mostly is what it is, right? Sort of confirming their initial decision making and saying, the onboarding confirmed my decision. So things like that are like, and you can build more and more, so don't get carried away. There's a lot of reporting that can be generated as a way to kind of measure impact.
Just don't get bogged in the analysis paralysis, right? All right, we want to hit on UX too. So Mitch, I want to hear a little bit about how you see your onboarding program and your onboarding experience affecting UX.
A lot of what I'm trying to drive with regard to UX digital experiences that is really driven by the tech tools that are the interface between our people and our clients. I'm driving off the book, The Effortless Experience, in that many of those times where we apply technology and user experiences, organizations have designed those interfaces to make their lives easier. So I think what's important for client-centric organizations and for CX professionals is for you to challenge that paradigm and say, when we are implementing user interfaces digitally with our clients, it's got to do something more for them, and it's got to be very easy. It has to be effortless, and it has to be obvious that there's a value to them in using the digital process. Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest challenge we get, because as we go through these next generations, let's face it, they're going to want as much of the process to be easy and digitized as possible.
Amazon Prime. That's what we're competing with. All right, Jen, and we had a great program with Carrie on the talent. I know we're going to have a lot more conversations about the impact of CX on talent. We had our managing partners roundtable in Chicago last week with some law firm leaders, and every one of them, they're kind of what's keeping them up at night is keeping talent, hiring and retaining talent. So huge topic. How has the impact of your onboarding affected the employee experience?
Like I was saying before, we started this by listening to what their pain points were, and then we worked to solve that for them and the client. And so they're happier because we're being intentional about listening to them. So if you open the door for feedback and you don't do anything with it, that's detrimental to anything you want to do. how involved the rest of the employees want to be with this, because they feel like they have control. They're empowered to make a difference in their own lives. We have a victimless kind of culture at work, like you don't get to be a victim, you get to solve your own problems. So they get to do that, and then we get to support them. So I think it's really helped bridge that gap. And then the sales
Good parenting
people,
advice, too.
yeah. And the sales team is happy, because they're like, oh yeah, I want this. I want them to have a good experience. Like I don't want to tell them this and then their experience is completely opposite. Then I'm a liar. Like so, everyone's got some skin in the game, like Mitch was saying, and they all want everybody to be successful. So it's been good.
Have you ever walked into a room at your firm and you just, as soon as they see marketing come in, eyes are starting to kind of roll, and you have that sort of one of the important things is that you consistently communicate together with management, because this isn't a marketing initiative. Like I said earlier, it's a business strategy, and your CEO doesn't know that that's what this is about. And so I think you need to create that integration for the message to really be impactful at the employee level. And that to me is the most important thing. And then just remember, anything that you try to institutionalize is going to feel not very good because it's really complicated. It's going to take time. And so I think just keep the focus on the power of the few influencing the many over time. I think that's really key in not trying to tackle all of this at once, thinking that we're going to change culture in a year or 2 years even. This is really a long game, and I think that management really needs to stand with you. Whoever leads, it's less about that and just more about the unity and really helping employees understand that their jobs got a whole lot more fun now because they do have a contribution to make. And once they start seeing that, assimilating that in a genuine way, you can't just put posters and whatever else internal campaigns, but I think that really is what begins to stick. People now have a stake in it, and so I think that's changing slowly.
And then we celebrate those successes, like Laura, you said it, like we work with the willing, right? Because not everybody wants to work with us, and then we celebrate the hell out of it, and we make that person look like they're a rock star, and then other people get jealous, and then they want to work with client experience and marketing, and it's just been the way of the world since at least professional services marketing has begun, because they're professionals, and sometimes firms and accounting firms and probably other ones picked their administrative assistant and said, now you're the marketing coordinator. Or they didn't really value what goes behind our education to be marketers. And so it's just a battle we've all faced.
I would add that when we really think about employees and how do we elevate that experience, how do we really focus on retaining them as valuable assets to the organization. When we all did our client journey mapping process, we didn't all hear the client say, your onboarding process should be a lot better. Now, some of them would have said parts of that process needed to be improved, but what I think we all saw was there were opportunities where friction existed for employees and for clients across the entire client journey that could be addressed and fixed during the onboarding process. If you're smart about onboarding, the client experience, the employee experience, and the user experience can ultimately all be blended together effectively for a better outcome.
I love that. And I'm curious, as I'm thinking about kind of orienting with new relationships, is now that we're going places and seeing people again, is a site visit or a client visit part of your onboarding process? In any way, either the client to you or you to the client?
Yes, it just depends. Like I've shared with people earlier, if they're technology savvy, doing a Zoom meeting's fine, because we have 24 offices, so all of our members might be in different states. And then some of our clients are older and not comfortable with that. And so if we can make it work, we'll go out and visit them in person. So it's case by case.
All right. Onboarding was a top priority in all of your CX prioritization. What were a couple of runner-up programs and efforts that You were also, I think Gabe, you told me there were 15 priorities that came up in your research internally and externally, and you narrowed it to 3. So will you share with us the other kind of priority projects that you are tackling in tandem with your onboarding?
Sure. I'll just focus on one. It was what we call milestone meetings. Essentially, our meetings that must occur sometime outside of the engagement. So these are, nothing crazy, right, in terms of being creative, but really having a plan for interactions with the client, plus your team, not just, the relationship manager, but a team represented by other service lines, that they have to have at least a minimum of 2 meetings outside of the engagement. So for instance, you have the audit season is over. If you ask the team what happens with communication after the season is over, it's just they go dormant, for until next season. So the part of this was to help them build this in the journey so that at least once or twice outside of that time period, they visit with the clients. And they come with an agenda, not an agenda to sell. We're not selling anything. This is really an opportunity to learn about the business. And that's really sticking, and not only that, is producing great results. Clients are really valuing the fact that you're there without charging them, just with an interest and a focus on them, and really walking away with so many opportunities. You don't need to sell a thing, I promise you. So milestone meetings built into the whole, and the milestone meeting is actually, when you look at the welcome kit, there's that, Mitch actually said it better than me, and I designed this thing. But somewhere along the 12-month period, you're going to see a milestone meeting built in. So the client, at the very beginning, understands that they're going to actually be meeting with us, and gets what else is also built in there. Surveys. Because one of the problems, someone asked about low response rates, is that marketing and business are not integrated. So by the time you survey, they're just getting something random from a marketing department. And so the more you can build it and integrate it in the business, in this case, the journey, and really understanding that this is one of the interactions, then the client is already prepared. They're going to serve me. That's the way they gauge how I feel.
And that's where the response rates get better, because we're training them.
Don't ask me about response
to
rates
ask
anyway.
for feedback.
I can talk, but
Any other priority topics you want to hit before we?
We right-sized our client list, so we let go of a bunch of clients, and then we put in parameters to stop people from bringing in clients that we don't want. So that was a big emotional bucket of fun.
Yeah, we're working on both of those things, and we're also, from the customer journey process, we recognize that the clients really want a digital platform to come in and interface to get a lot of the common answers. So we are redeploying, you can call it a portal, a sign-in area. We all log into our banks to do electronic banking and operate like that. So we're creating what we hope will be a best in practice sort of environment for them to come in and be able to pay their bills, find all the document sharing resources, ask questions with hopefully a live chatbot person that would be talking through that site, a knowledge base of data that they can do some research on their own instead of starting to just go out to the web. Why don't you start to study, what we can offer as far as insight? And the power of that for us is we've designed it so that it is connected to our CRM system. So you will have to sign in. The system will recognize it. It will sit in the Salesforce Experience Cloud. So we'll be able to see who it is. We'll understand what their interest is. We'll understand what we're currently selling them. And we'll be able to put and post predictive information based on who they are and what they've been looking at to what they need to be thinking about next. And then our next generation of that will be creating chatter communities based on particular topics. And not only are we going to allow clients to do this, but we're going to allow prospects, referral sources, and alumni so that they can come in and create community groups themselves And we'll monitor and not control, but we will allow them to sort of get the conversation going.
I love that because that positions you to be proactive, which from our 2021 client feedback data from law firms, so many data points from law firm, not only electronic surveys, but the interviews we conducted, the number one way to add value, according to clients, is to be proactive. So there's a crowdsourced idea for your next breakout session, being proactive. All right, what questions do you have? Can you type them into the app?
Sorry, I didn't clear the testing earlier.
I think why makes it like a great question.
I'm like, I'm not sure that's a real question, but
What's my favorite
somebody
color?
wants to know.
Mine's green. My favorite color is green.
Okay, so I know John Goodman had a question, and
Am I allowed to just say it?
yes,
Yes.
you are.
This is for Gabe. You talked about your welcome kit, but does part of the welcome kit include here are the 3 most probable unpleasant surprises you're going to run into over this relationship? The euphemism is friction, but unpleasant surprises is probably more correct.
You mean for the client, not the firm,
for the
right? We do have a portion that really identifies, essentially summarizes what we learn in the discovery. It is presented not in the way of these are the top 3 challenges that you're going to run into as you work with us, but it does really offer insight into what we heard they said, and an opportunity for how we can solve it. So I don't know if I want to really be all that forward when it comes to, these are the 3 challenges, in dealing with us. But
That's exactly why I asked it, because we find marketing people are deathly afraid of talking about there's going to be any unpleasant
Yeah.
surprises. But that goes back to transparency.
Yeah.
Also. And if you say, this is more than likely going to happen, here's how we can deal with it, then you get credit for being transparent.
As marketers, I think that we need to believe really that, we're solving for a human need. That's it. And so human needs require a finesse in terms of the way you communicate. Many of you probably hear the term, empathy-based marketing. It truly is. It kind of emerged as a result of the pandemic, but really is how we are interacting. So the directive to our team, the marketing team, is to, stop communicating those terms and translate the technical language or anything else in just fairly simple ways so that the client feels identified. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's...
I got 2 questions on the screen. One, Mitch, what technology tool did you mention that you are using?
Oh, the Guide CX, GUIDECX.com.
Great, thank you. And Jen, do you really have 120 steps in your onboarding?
Yeah, and it's funny because you just asked that question. This is a new product we developed, and so there are a lot of steps because we're connecting their bank account to different kind of situations. But we do tell them this is a new service, and there is going to be pain points. But if you can help us, give us feedback through this process, it'll make it better for you, and then we can learn in the future. So yeah, there actually is.
Great. All right, and books. The books you're reading again.
All right. So if there's a book you need to read that ties really well with CX is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Phenomenal. Again, going back to the issue of progress is not linear.
I second that. We're using it all the time.
It's really focused. It's easy to establish goals. Focus on the system. CX is all about the system, not really the goal.
I just listen to books on tape mostly, or audiobooks. And I just listened to Richard Branson's about flipping business on its head, and I think it has a worse title. But it was really cool about understanding what your purpose is and having a purpose-based business to drive engagement with your clients and employees. So it's an old book.
And To Kill a Mockingbird.
Effortless experience. You got to read it. You got to understand it. It's based on 77,000 interviews across the globe with people saying what they want as businesses, and so it's a must read for you.
What was that again? I'm sorry.
The effortless
Experience. And he's reading To Kill a Mockingbird too. So, and I just read a great true story, Into the Forest, a World War II. Great book. Will you be willing to share your onboarding kits? That's probably a offline conversation, maybe come up and speak to them afterwards. And then, is there anything based on your analysis identified that you could stop doing because it's not adding value? I like that.
Well, I got it all right, so no. I guess the answer is no. I don't know. I'll think about that.
I like to think that when we're talking about anything with onboarding, we're trying to do our best right now as organizations, and it's pretty random. So it all feels somewhat additive. But when I'm talking with our associates and we're really going through the process, I constantly say, let's re-engineer this to make it better for you and the client. So it's about not maybe getting rid of something, but doing something in a smarter way that makes the technology, the employee experience, and the client experience all easier and better.
All right, we're past our time. Thank you very much. Panelists will linger if you've got some questions.